Listening to the Inner Sound, the Perennial Practice of Shabd Yoga, From Biology to Religion to Science. Andrea Diem Lane. The teachings of Shiv Dayal Singh, the founder of Radhasoami, are based on the practice of Surat Shabd Yoga. Listening to the inner sound to achieve higher states of consciousness has a long history and can be found in different religious traditions around the world, ranging from Gnostic Christianity to Islamic Sufism to Tibetan Buddhism. In this presentation, we will explore the originations of Shabd Yoga and trace it over time in its various manifestations up until the present day. In so doing, we will want to see how listening to the inner sound is theologically interpreted in varying cultures on distinct continents. We are especially interested in showing how Shiv Dayal Singh's own teachings have greatly influenced a number of Shabd Yoga-related movements in Asia, Europe, Africa, and North America. The biological heritage of humankind. The human brain is the most sophisticated operating system known to exist. It has roughly 86 billion neurons and trillions of synaptic connections via a vast labyrinth of axons, dendrites, and other subtle clefts. Although it weighs only 3 or so pounds, within its enfolded compound resides the most remarkable feature in the known universe: consciousness. Consciousness is the supreme mystery that enlivens all that we know about the world around us. While most of the time our awareness is projected outwardly in order to help us better survive and adapt in this evolutionary experiment writ large, there are those mystical pioneers who have turned inwards to discover where this very consciousness arises from and explore what possibilities it portends. Humans have developed a variety of tools to alter their awareness and make it possible to venture into hitherto uncharted territories of the mind. One of the most ancient techniques that have become increasingly popular over time, particularly in the modern era, is a meditational practice centered on listening to subtler and subtler inner sounds. It is most well known today as Shabd or Nad Yoga. It is intriguing to speculate about how listening to inner sounds first originated among early humankind, long before it became codified as a practice. There are several hypotheses that offer tantalizing suggestions, including early near-death experiences, sleep paralysis, extended periods of sensory deprivation, chemical alteration, and more. In near-death experiences, NDEs, for instance, a significant number of patients reported hearing a beautiful melody. I heard what seemed like millions of little golden bells ringing, tinkling. They rang and rang. Many times since I've heard those bells in the middle of the night. Next I heard humming. Music surrounded me. It came from all directions. Its harmonic beauty, unlike earthly vocal or instrumental sounds, was totally undistorted. It flowed unobtrusively like a glassy river, quietly worshipful, excitingly edifying, and totally comforting. It provided a reassuring type of comfort, much like a protective blanket that whispered peace and love. I had never sensed anything like it. Perhaps angelic would describe it. And then I heard the music. It was a tone so sublimely perfect that remembering it still brings me to tears. I knew then and know now that I was hearing the symphony of angels, the song of the universe, what some have called the music of the spheres. All thoughts melted in its melody, and everything else ceased to be of any importance. Sleep paralysis is often accompanied by a severe feeling of immobility, a numbness where one feels as if frozen. According to a 2011 meta-analysis, Prevalence of Sleep Paralysis, Sharpless and Barber combined more than 30 studies on sleep paralysis prevalence from a variety of cultures and groups, giving them a sample size of over 36,000. They concluded that approximately 8% of people experience sleep paralysis, rising to around 28% in high-risk groups, those that have a disrupted sleep pattern, and up to 34% in those suffering from psychiatric disorders such as anxiety and depression. While at first glance one may wonder what sleep paralysis has to do with meditation or yoga, a close analysis shows that it may well have been a triggering point among early humans for a deeper psychic exploration. This is precisely because sleep paralysis is often accompanied by extremely vivid visions that are usually taken as real and not merely dreamy hallucinations. In some sense, every night we sleep, we will undergo varying degrees of sleep paralysis, since it serves as a biochemical way to inhibit our bodily movements while dreaming. As Alina Bradford explains, during rapid eye movement, REM sleep, the brain has vivid dreams, while the muscles of the body are essentially turned off. While sleeping, the muscles are unable to move so that the person won't be able to act out dreams with their body. Sleep paralysis happens when a person wakes up before REM is finished. The person will be conscious, but the body's ability to move hasn't been turned back on yet. There is an intriguing parallel here to Shabd Yoga meditation, since one of the very first signs that the technique is working is a growing numbness and blissful sensation in the lower extremities of the body. Jagat Singh, 1884 to 1951, the third guru proper in the Beos lineage, argued, "The acid test of withdrawal in meditation is numbness." In the article, The Science of Going Within, exploring the neurobiological basis of Shabd Yoga meditation, we hypothesized that Shabd Yoga practitioners who experience the onslaught of numbness in their extremities, which shouldn't be confused with paresthesia, the sensation that one feels when one's foot goes to sleep, during deep meditation, are experiencing a biochemical process that is similar to what happens when we are asleep, and certain neurochemicals manifest to inhibit bodily movements. In other words, Shabd Yoga induces a conscious sleep paralysis of sorts. If this is correct, we should be able to ascertain whether or not gamma-aminobutyric acid and glycine levels are operative. If this hypothesis is true, then it may well be that what happens during sleep paralysis, which occurs randomly and unconsciously, served as a catalytic portal for some to see if they could induce similar experiences consciously while awake. This is not to reduce Shabd Yoga meditation merely to biochemistry, but rather to show that the two are not mutually exclusive and may actually correlate in quantifiable ways. For instance, we argued in The Science of Going Within that if Shabd Yoga meditation is indeed a neurobiological process, then there should be telltale signs of such that can be quantified by accurately measuring the levels of neurotransmitters, such as gamma-aminobutyric acid and glycine, in the brain while one is feeling the sensation of conscious paralysis while meditating. The religious historical trajectory. Early figurines discovered in Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa in the Indus Valley, which date back to before the Vedas, suggestively indicate that some form of yoga was practiced. Jan Y. Diansky has given a lucid argument in his groundbreaking article, The Indus Valley Origin of a Yoga Practice, that the practice of withdrawing one's consciousness from the body has a long precedence and can be dated to long before the Vedas were finalized. As Diansky explains, Mahadevan comes to the conclusion that the Soma rituals of the Indo-Iranian religions were based on the pre-Aryan Harappan substratum, and that this is the reason for the remarkable resemblances between the Harappan symbolism of a sacred filter, the peculiar stand in front of animals on many seals, and the Soma ritual as described in the Rig Veda. Although the Indus Valley civilization still holds many secrets, the evidence shows that some of its traditions survived and are still alive today. The system of yoga which originated in the Indus Valley has existed for more than 5,000 years and is now moving from being an Indian tradition to becoming the common property of all humanity. Thus, it is very reasonable to assume that the interior exploration of one's own consciousness by hearing subtle sounds and contemplating inner light is not merely a cultural artifact restricted only to certain geographical regions, but is rather a biological inherency which can be accessed by anyone, anywhere, and any time. In short, Shabd or Narrated Yoga elicits a structural pathway within our own neuroanatomies. Yet, it is nevertheless evident that the evolution of this practice has cultural and historical variants that have developed over time. India, spiritual systems in particular, have defined and refined the technique and have given the most exhaustive treatment of the subject to the world. Given that listening to the inner sound to elevate one's consciousness is a structural potential within all human beings, and given that it most likely has a naturalistic origination, the question we wish to explore in the following sections is how the practice manifested over time in differing geographical regions. What we discovered in researching this from a historical and sociological perspective is that the modus operandi of concentrating on inner music seems to be invariably intertwined to the theology of the local region. In other words, Christianity's understanding of Shabd Yoga, a term we will use loosely to mean simply any form of meditation that listens to the inner sound for concentration, is invariably explained in light of the Bible, whereas Sikhism's understanding is explained in light of the Sri Guru Granth Sahib. The universal aspect of Shabd Yoga, in other words, is relativized by the historical time and context in which it is practiced. This, of course, doesn't minimize its transcendent character, but only underlines that how we interpret our inner experiences is culturally variable. Selected references to listening to the inner sound across cultures. I thought it would be useful to select references to the inner sound in the world's religions as a cross-cultural reference. The following is by no means exhaustive, but does provide a tantalizing glimpse into the universality of Shabd, even if some of the examples only tap into its preliminary stages. Hatha Yoga Pradipika. When the Brahma Granthi in the heart is pierced through by pranayama, then a sort of happiness is experienced in the vacuum of the heart, and the anahat sounds, like various tinkling sounds of ornaments, are heard in the body. Sitting with Mukta Asana and with the Sambhavi Madil, the yogi should hear the sound inside his right ear with collected mind. In the third stage, the sound of a drum is known to arise in Tai Sunya between the eyebrows, and then the Vayu goes to the Mahasunya, which is the home of all the Siddhis. When the Rudra Granthi is pierced and the air enters the seat of the Lord, the space between the eyebrows, then the perfect sound, like that of a flute, is produced. The sound which a Muni hears by closing his ears with his fingers should be heard attentively till the mind becomes steady in it. In the beginning, the sounds heard are of great variety and very loud, but as the practice increases, they become more and more subtle. Nada is the bolt of the stable door for the horse, the minds of the yogis. A yogi should determine to practice constantly in the hearing of the nada sounds. The knowable interpenetrates the anahata sound which is heard, and the mind interpenetrates the knowable. The mind becomes absorbed there, which is the seat of the all-pervading, almighty Lord. Nada Bindu Upanishad. The yogin being in the Siddhasana posture and practicing the Vaishnavi mudra should always hear the internal sound through the right ear. In the beginning of his practice he hears many loud sounds. They gradually increase in pitch and are heard more and more subtly. At first the sounds are like those proceeding from the ocean, clouds, kettle drum and cataracts. In the middle stage, those proceeding from mardala, a musical instrument, bell and horn. At the last stage, those proceeding from tinkling bells, flute, vinya, a musical instrument, and bees. Thus he hears many such sounds, more and more subtle. When he comes to that stage when the sound of the great kettle drum is being heard, he should try to distinguish only sounds more and more subtle. Just as the bee, drinking the honey alone, does not care for the odor, so the chitta, which is always absorbed in sound, does not long for sensual objects, as it is bound by the sweet smell of nada, and has abandoned its flitting nature. The serpent, chitta, through listening to the nada, is entirely absorbed in it, and becoming unconscious of everything, concentrates itself on the sound. The sound serves the purpose of a sharp goad to control the maddened elephant, chitta, which roves in the pleasure garden of the sensual objects. It serves the purpose of a snare for binding the deer, chitta. It also serves the purpose of a shore to the ocean waves of chitta. When the spiritual sight becomes fixed without any object to be seen, when the vayu, prana, becomes still without any effort, and when the chitta becomes firm without any support, he becomes of the form of the internal sound of Brahma Pranava. Sadilya Upanishad of Atharva Nuveda. For the period of 28 months, he should practice 6 times at every sitting through the 3 sandhyas, morning, noon, and evening, and during the intervals. By this the nadis become purified. Then the body becomes light and bright. The gastric fire is increased within, and there is the manifestation of nada, internal sound. Then he becomes lean in body, serene in face, and clear-eyed, hears the spiritual sounds distinctly, becomes free from all diseases, and conquers his bindu. Merging the sound in the light and elevating the brows a little, this is the way of, or is a part of, the former practice. This brings about the state of unmani, which causes the destruction of the mind. Teobindu Upanishad of Krishna Yajurveda. That which is of the nature of all causes and effects, but yet without them, that which is without sankalpa, of the nature of all bliss and the auspicious, that which is the great one of the nature of bliss, that which illuminates all luminaries, and that which is full of the bliss of nada, spiritual sound, without any enjoyment and contemplation, and beyond nadas and kalas, parts, that is tma, that is the I, the indestructible. Tibetan Book of the Dead. O nobly born, when thy body and mind were separating, thou must have experienced a glimpse of the pure truth, subtle, sparkling, bright, dazzling, glorious, and radiantly awesome. In appearance like a mirage moving across a landscape in springtime in one continuous stream of vibrations. Be not daunted thereby, nor terrified, nor awed. That is the radiance of thine own true nature. Recognize it. From the midst of that radiance, the natural sound of reality, reverberating like 1,000 thunders, simultaneously sounding, will come. That is the natural sound of thine own real self. Be not daunted thereby, nor terrified, nor awed. O nobly born, 5-coloured radiances, vibrating and dazzling like coloured threads, flashing, radiant and transparent, glorious and awe-inspiring, will strike against thy heart, so bright that the eye cannot bear to look upon them. Be not afraid of that brilliant radiance of 5 colours, nor terrified, but know that wisdom to be thine own. Within those radiances, the natural sound of the truth will reverberate like 1,000 thunders. The sound will come with a rolling reverberation. Fear not. Flee not. Be not terrified. Know them, i.e. these sounds, to be of thine own inner light. Richard Raleigh and the Fire of Love. I was sitting, forsooth, in a certain chapel, and while I was finding great delight in the sweetness of prayer or meditation, suddenly I felt within me an unwonted and pleasant heat. And though at first I wavered, doubting for a long time whence it might be, I became convinced that it was not from the creature, but from the Creator, because I found it grow more warm and pleasant. But when half a year, 3 months, and some weeks had passed by, during which that warmth of surpassing sweetness continued with me, there was borne in on my perception a heavenly spiritual sound, which pertains to the song of everlasting praise and the sweetness of the invisible melody. Invisible, I call it, because it can be neither known nor heard, except by him to whom it is vouchsafed, and he must first be purified and separated from the world. For while I was sitting in the same chapel and chanting psalms at night before supper, as I could, I heard as it were the tinkling music of stringed instruments, or rather of singers, over my head. And while my whole heart and all my desires were engrossed in prayer and heavenly things, suddenly, I know not how, I felt within a symphony of song, and I overheard a most delightful, heavenly harmony, which remained in my mind. For straightway, while I meditated, my thought was turned into melody of song. And for meditation I, as it were, sang songs, and that music voiced itself even in my prayers and psalmody. Hazrat Inayat Khan and the Mysticism of Sound. Abstract sound is called Sat-i-Samad by the Sufis. All space is filled with it. The vibrations of this sound are too fine to be either audible or visible to the material ears or eyes, since it is even difficult for the eye to see the form and colour of the ethereal vibrations on the external plane. It was the Sat-i-Samad, the sound of the abstract plane, which Mohammed heard in the cave of Gar-i-Hira when he became lost in his divine ideal. The Quran refers to this sound in the words, "Be," and all became. Moses heard this sound on Mount Sinai when in communion with God, and the same word was audible to Christ when absorbed in his heavenly Father in the wilderness. Shiva heard the same Anahad nada during his samadhi in the cave of the Himalayas. The flute of Krishna is symbolic of the same sound. This sound is the source of all revelation to the masters, to whom it is revealed from within. It is because of this that they know and teach one and the same truth. The Sufi knows of the past, present, and future, and about all things in life by being able to know the direction of sound. Every aspect of one's being in which sound manifests has a peculiar effect upon life, for the activity of vibrations has a special effect in every direction. The knower of the mystery of sound knows the mystery of the whole universe. Whoever has followed the strains of this sound has forgotten all earthly distinctions and differences, and has reached that goal of truth in which all the blessed ones of God unite. Space is within the body as well as around it. In other words, the body is in the space, and the space is in the body. This being the case, the sound of the abstract is always going on within, around, and about man. Man does not hear it as a rule, because his consciousness is entirely centered in his material existence. Man becomes so absorbed in his experiences in the external world through the medium of the physical body that space, with all its wonders of light and sound, appears to him blank. This can be easily understood by studying the nature of color. There are many colors that are quite distinct by themselves, yet when mixed with others of still brighter hue, they become altogether eclipsed. Even bright colors, when combined with gold, silver, diamonds, or pearls, serve merely as a background to the dazzling embroidery. So it is with the abstract sound compared with the sounds of the external world. The limited volume of earthly sounds is so concrete that it dims the effect of the sound of the abstract to the sense of hearing. Although in comparison to it, the sounds of the earth are like that of a whistle to a drum. When the abstract sound is audible, all other sounds become indistinct to the mystic. The sound of the abstract is called anahad in the Veda, meaning unlimited sound. The Sufis name it samad, which suggests the idea of intoxication. The word intoxication is here used to signify upliftment, the freedom of the soul from its earthly bondage. Those who are able to hear the sati samad and meditate on it are relieved from all worries, anxieties, sorrows, fears, and diseases, and the soul is freed from captivity in the senses and in the physical body. The soul of the listener becomes the all-pervading consciousness, and his spirit becomes the battery which keeps the whole universe in motion. Some train themselves to hear the sati samad in the solitude, on the seashore, on the river bank, and in the hills and dales. Others attain it while sitting in the caves of the mountains, or when wandering constantly through forests and deserts, keeping themselves in the wilderness apart from the haunts of men. Yogis and ascetics blow sing, a horn or shankar, a shell which awakens in them this inner tone. Dervishes play nai or algoza, a double flute, for the same purpose. The bells and gongs in the churches and temples are meant to suggest to the thinker the same sacred sound, and thus lead him towards the inner life. This sound develops through 10 different aspects because of its manifestation through 10 different tubes of the body. It sounds like thunder, the roaring of the sea, the jingling of bells, running water, the buzzing of bees, the twittering of sparrows, the veena, the whistle, the sound of shankar, until it finally becomes hu, the most sacred of all sounds. This sound, hu, is the beginning and end of all sounds, be they from man, bird, beast, or thing. A minute study will prove this fact, which can be realized by listening to the sound of the steam engine or of a mill, while the echo of bells or gongs gives a typical illustration of the sound, hu. The Supreme Being has been called by various names in different languages, but the mystics have known him as hu, the natural name, not man-made, the only name of the nameless which all nature constantly proclaims. The sound, hu, is most sacred. The mystics of all ages call it Ismi Azam, the name of the Most High, for it is the origin and end of every sound as well as the background of each word. The word, hu, is the spirit of all sounds and of all words, and is hidden under them all, as the spirit in the body. It does not belong to any language, but no language can help belonging to it. This alone is the true name of God, a name that no people and no religion can claim as their own. This word is not only uttered by human beings, but is repeated by animals and birds. All things and all beings exclaim this name of the Lord, for every activity of life expresses distinctly or indistinctly this very sound. This is the word mentioned in the Bible as existing before the light came into being. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The mystery of Hu is revealed to the Sufi who journeys through the path of initiation. The more a Sufi listens to Soti Samad, the sound of the abstract, the more his consciousness becomes free from all the limitations of life. The soul floats above the physical and mental plane without any special effort on man's part, which shows its calm and peaceful state. A dreamy look comes into his eyes, and his countenance becomes radiant. He experiences the unearthly joy and rapture of wayad, or ecstasy. When ecstasy overwhelms him, he is neither conscious of the physical existence nor of the mental. This is the heavenly wine to which all Sufi poets refer, which is totally unlike the momentary intoxications of this mortal plane. A heavenly bliss then springs in the heart of a Sufi. His mind is purified from sin, his body from all impurities, and a pathway is opened for him towards the world unseen. He begins to receive inspirations, intuitions, impressions, and revelations without the least effort on his part. He is no longer dependent upon a book or a teacher for divine wisdom. The light of his soul, the Holy Spirit, begins to shine upon him. I, by the light of soul, realize the beauty of the heavens, and the grandeur of the earth are the echo of thy magic flute. Shefir. The divine melody in Sri Guru Granth Sahib. The unstruck melody of Gurbani is obtained, and egotism is eliminated. Guru Nanak. The unstruck melody constantly vibrates within. My mind is exalted and uplifted. I am lovingly absorbed in the Lord. Guru Amar Das. The unstruck melody of the Sovereign Lord's harp vibrates. Kabir. The unstruck melody resounds and resonates in peaceful ease. Guru Arjan. The ambrosial nectar, the unstruck melody of Gurbani, rains down continually. Guru Arjan. Beyond the 9 gates, the 10th gate is found, and liberation is obtained. The unstruck melody of the Shabad vibrates. Guru Amar Das. The unstruck melody of the Bani resounds through the pure word of the Shabad, Through the word of the Guru's Shabad, we are absorbed into the true One. Guru Amar Das. The immaculate Bani and the unstruck melody of the sound current vibrate, and in the true court, honour is obtained. Guru Amar Das. There the unstruck melody of the Shabad vibrates day and night. Through the Guru's teachings, the Shabad is heard. Guru Amar Das. The unstruck melody vibrates as they dwell within the home of the self. Guru Amar Das. Radhasoami and its influence on Shabdism. It is remarkable to note that a small spiritual movement founded by Shiv Dayal Singh in the mid-19th century would, over time, have a worldwide impact on the practice of Shabd Yoga. This has occurred primarily because the Radhasoami tradition has blossomed into a large number of sub-branches throughout India and abroad. These same groups have, in turn, witnessed further splintering, and there has been a surprising contingent of new religious movements, such as Ekankar, Masterpath, MSIA, and Kuan Yin, that, though distancing themselves from a direct lineal connection to Radhasoami, owe a large debt to Shiv Dayal Singh and his successors. Much of this is due to the clarity with which various Radhasoami masters have explained the path of Surat Shabd Yoga. The modernization of Shabd Yoga owes much to Shiv Dayal Singh's core text, Sarbakan, both prose and poetry, 1884, and the numerous writings from his main successor, Rai Saligram, particularly Radhasoami Mat Prakash, 1896. Later gurus in both the Agra and Beos branches have published extensively in English, Hindi, Urdu and Punjabi. Professor Mark Juergensmeyer and Professor David Christopher Lane, working for Oxford University Press's bibliographic series on Hinduism, have provided a rich outline of Radhasoami literature over the past century, which is now available online. The book, The Radhasoami Tradition, provides a general overview of early publications relating to the movement. The following is a pertinent excerpt. Although the history of Radhasoami has been comprehensively explored in Urdu, Punjabi and Hindi, there has also been some substantial work done in English. Apparently, the very first English text by any Radhasoami guru was Rai Saligram's Radhasoami Mat Prakash, 1896, that was followed several years later by Brahm Shankar Misra's Discourses on Radhasoami Faith. The book, though, is incomplete due to the author's death in 1907. Scholarly attention was first paid to the Radhasoami movement indirectly when Max Muller included a small section on Rai Saligram in his often quoted Ramakrishna, His Life and Work, 1899. Prior to this time, however, Saligram and Radhasoami were mentioned in passing in several theosophical books. Due to the diligent research of Daniel Caldwell of Tucson, Arizona, an authority on the early days of theosophy, a number of references to Saligram and his teachings have been located. First, there is a paragraph on Saligram on page 151 of the appendix to 4th edition in The Occult World by A.P. Sinnett, London, Trubner and Company, 1884. Second, there is a brief mention of him in James Bissett Pratt, India and Its Faiths, A Traveller's Record, London, Constable and Company Limited, 1916, Chapter 11, The Radhasoamis and Theosophists, and J. N. Farquhar's Modern Religious Movements in India, New York, Macmillan Company, 1915, Esoteric Buddhism by A.P. Sinnett in 1885, San Diego Wizard's Bookshelf, 1981, on pages 9 and 10. Third, there is a short description of Saligram and his guru in a letter allegedly received around February 1882, on page 251 of the Mahatma Letters, Adya Madras, the Theosophical Publishing House, 1979. And fourth, Saligram's name appears as a subscriber in the December 1880 issue of Theosophist magazine. The first exclusive treatment given to Radhasoami itself comes from H.D. Griswold, whose pamphlet, Radhasoami Sect, 1907, published by Kaupor Mission Press, appears to be the first of its kind in English. Notable expansion on the history and tenets of the movement were added by J. N. Farquhar, who in early 1914 visited Swami Bagh in Agra. His book, Modern Religious Movements in India, and his revised yet condensed version of the same as an article in James Hastings' Encyclopedia of Religion and Ethics, 1928, were perhaps the most cited scholarly sources on the historical roots of Radhasoami up until the mid-1970s. An occurrence which has created, as we will shortly see, a reservoir for misinformation and misunderstanding. The next significant essay was James Bissett Pratt's India and Its Faiths, A Traveller's Record, 1916, which, despite containing some first-hand observations, relies heavily on Farquhar's exposition. Early in the next decade, Sir Charles Eliot briefly noted the Radhaswamis, claiming they were a combination of Kabir Panth and Christian ideas, in the second volume of his Hinduism and Buddhism, An Historical Sketch, 1921. All of my information about these early publications comes from Daniel Caldwell, who also checked the early manuscripts on microfilm. An interesting sidebar here is that in the Mahatma letters, Saligram's name is incorrectly spelled as Subi Ram. Caldwell checked the manuscript on microfilm and discovered that the original version lists Saligram's name correctly, Saligram. Apparently, whoever did the transcription messed up the spelling, thereby coming up with the confusing misprint Subi Ram. Not until the 1930s, though, did information on the Radhasoamis become extensively available. In this 10-year span alone, 1930 to 1940, more material was produced than in all the previous decades combined. With this rapid increase came the works of Nichols MacNichol, The Living Religions of the Indian People, 1934, H.D. Griswold, Insights into Modern Hinduism, 1934, Paul Brunton, A Search in Secret India, 1934, and L.S. O'Malley's Popular Hinduism, The Religion of the Masses, 1935, all of which, with the exception of MacNichol's, contained lengthy sections on the Radhasoami faith. Coupled with this scholarly infusion were several books published by the satsangs themselves. Maharishi Shiv Brat Lal's Light on Anand Yog, December 1931, a Beas translation of Shiv Dayal Singh's Saba Khan Radhasoami, prose, 1933, several books by Dr. Julian P. Johnson, With a Great Master in India, Call of the East, The Unquenchable Flame, The Path of the Masters, and an unpublished manuscript, More Light on the Path, and a large volume, later divided into two, by Lekraj Puri, Mysticism, The Spiritual Path, 1938. Since the 1930s, a number of works, both popular and academic, have been published. These range from Raji Maharaj's One Truth, One People, 1945, S.D. Maheshwari's Radhasoami Faith, History and Tenets, 1954, Anne Marshall's Hunting the Guru in India, 1963, Khushwant Singh's History of the Sikhs, Volume 2, 1966, and Guru's God-Men and Good People, to Philip Ashby's Modern Trends in Hinduism, 1974, and Agam Prasad Mathur's groundbreaking overview, Radhasoami Faith, A Historical Study, 1974. All of these texts, in shorter or greater detail, describe some facet of Radhasoami. By the 1970s, scholars in North America and Europe showed tremendous interest in the Sant tradition of North India, the spiritual basis for both Sikhism and Radhasoami. In 1978, an international conference was held at the University of California, Berkeley, on the Sant tradition. This was important for a number of reasons, not the least of which was an increased interest in the Radhasoami movement. Leading this contingency was Mark Juergensmeyer, a professor of religious studies at the Graduate Theological Union and the University of California, Berkeley, who published several articles on the movement, including Radhasoami as Transnational Religion in Understanding the New Religions, 1978. Following in Juergensmeyer's footsteps, Lawrence Babb authored an important analysis of Radhasoami beliefs, particularly Swami Bhag's, in the first section of his book, Redemptive Encounters, 1986. Daniel Gold, himself an initiate of the late Radhasoami master K.S. Man Singh, wrote his PhD dissertation on the notion of the Guru as Lord in the Sant and Radhasoami traditions for the University of Chicago. His dissertation was later published by Oxford University under the title Lord as Guru, 1987. A number of other academic works were also written during this time, including Brian Walsh's The Sat Guru in the Sant Tradition, 1980, first defended as an MA thesis for John F. Kennedy University in Orinda, California, and later published as a monograph by Mount San Antonio College Press, 1992. This author's MA thesis, Radhasoami Mat, 1981, and Aaron Tulsky's senior thesis, The Radhasoami Tradition, 1986, for the University of Michigan. Some of the more outstanding and influential publications came from the Radhasoami Center in Dial Bagh, including several publications from Anand Swarup, known honorifically as Sahibji Maharaj, such as Radhasoami Mat Darshan and Diary of Sahibji Maharaj in 3 parts. Of particular interest, especially from a historical perspective, is the edited volume, Souvenir, which illustrates a brief history of the progress of the Radhasoami Satsang during its first 100 years from 1861 to 1961. The present spiritual leader, Reverend P.S. Satsangi Sahab, has been at the forefront of presenting Radhasoami teachings in a scientific manner, such as expositions on truth, ultimate reality, and supreme being. More popular Radhasoami-related texts on Shabd Yoga include Kirpal Singh's Crown of Life and Naam, or Word. Sawan Singh's Spiritual Gems, Sharan Singh's Die to Live, and Madhav Prasad Sinha's teachings as expounded in Phelps' Notes. Ironically, however, it appears that the most influential book on Radhasoami, and one that has, also with irony, been heavily plagiarized over the years, comes from an American who converted to Radhasoami Satsang Beas in the early 1930s. It is called The Path of the Masters, and has been instrumental in making the teachings of Shiv Dayal Singh and Shabd Yoga widely known to spiritual seekers around the world. It has gone through a number of editions and been translated into several languages. Even though it was first published in 1939, it continues to be one of the best-selling books on Sant Mat. While in academic circles, Mark Juergensmeyer's Radhasoami Reality, published in 1991, has established itself as the essential scholarly overview of the movement. These books and many more owe their existence to some measure to Shiv Dayal Singh, since he was the founder of the movement and his articulation of Shabd Yoga remains the essential core of the teachings. Yet, Shiv Dayal Singh's ideas have been modified by various offshoot groups and gurus over the years for their own purposes. This is especially the case with those new religious movements that have attempted to genealogically dissociate themselves from the Agra Paramapara and have created their own mythological lineages. Ekankar, as founded by Paul Twitchell, who was duly initiated by Kirpal Singh of Ruhani Satsang in 1955, and has heavily plagiarized from Radhasoami texts, is a prime example of a group that has invented a master lineage, but which nevertheless advocates a modified version of Shabd Yoga. Also included in this category are John Roger Hinkins of MSIA, who has developed his own unique spiritual cosmology, replete with ascending sounds which he claims will help accessing the higher planes of consciousness. Gary Olson, founder of Master Path, who has mimicked much of Radhasoami teachings, but without the ethical restrictions. Ching Hai, who has popularized listening to the inner sound via her Kuan Yin technique. Formerly she was a representative of Thakur Singh, one of the alleged successors of Kirpal Singh, and the list goes on. What is most intriguing about all these various offshoots, besides their attempt to deny their indebtedness to Radhasoami, from which they have all gleaned much of their understanding of Shabd Yoga, is how they have popularized the idea of the sound current, even if they have altered the techniques and the theology surrounding it from Shiv Dayal Singh's original impetus. The spread of Shabd Yoga is primarily due to increasing fractionalization of Radhasoami and related movements over the past 150 years. Thus, while some may lament that the teachings of Shiv Dayal Singh have splintered off in sometimes very contentious directions, the fact remains that it was because of this very splintering that Shabd Yoga has become increasingly popular around the world. A Google search for the word Shabd or sound current will display over 289,000 results, ranging from simple Wikipedia entries to the Chopra Foundation to obscure religious seminars such as the Sound Current Healing Seminar, conducted by a woman by the name of Ashtara Sasha White. No doubt, some may rightly lament the commercialization of Shabd Yoga and the alteration of some of its core teachings, particularly doing away with vegetarianism and charging money for initiation or membership. But despite such redactions, it is remarkable that a relatively unknown mystic adept living in Agra in the 19th century would, over time, have such a tremendous impact on the spiritual practices of millions worldwide. Today, there is a growing movement among some Shabd Yoga adherents, spearheaded most prominently by the current spiritual leader of Radhasoami Dayal Bagh, Prem Saran Satsangi, to present the practice and teachings of listening to the inner sound within a modern scientific framework, even going so far as to conduct quantifiable experiments on seasoned meditators measuring their brainwave patterns. This is a very significant development since it opens the field of Shabd Yoga to a wider, more secular audience that may have no religious or satsang affiliation. In conclusion, we have seen how listening to the inner sound is not merely a cultural or historical artifact, but is rather an inherent structural potential within all human beings to turn their attention within and achieve higher states of consciousness. However, we have also noted how Shabd Yoga, though first articulated by yogis and mystics in India, has been modified through history due to varying cultural influences. We have witnessed an increase in its popularity through such saints as Kabir, Namdev, Dadu, Paltu Sahib, Tulsi Sahib, and other Nirguna Baki poets. But undoubtedly the most influential exponent of Shabd Yoga practice is Shiv Dayal Singh, the founder of Radhasoami, whose influence has grown exponentially over the past 150 years. Alfred North Whitehead once quipped that all of philosophy is merely a footnote to Plato. Analogously, it may not be hyperbolic to say that the vast majority of Shabd Yoga teachings today are but varied extensions of what Shiv Dayal Singh himself taught publicly from 1861 to his death in 1878. Since we are gathered here to celebrate Shiv Dayal Singh's 200th birth anniversary, perhaps no greater tribute can be bequeathed to him than the irrefutable fact that his teachings are promulgated, even if in diluted form, worldwide, and that he continues to directly influence the spiritual lives of millions. The Radhasoami Connection. Exploring the influence of Shiv Dayal Singh's life and work around the world. David Christopher Lane. Who would have imagined that a relatively unknown spiritual master living in Agra, India from 1818 to 1878 would eventually influence the lives of millions around the world? Shiv Dayal Singh, the founder of Radhasoami, has had an impact on a number of disparate fronts, including religion, literature, music, education, industry, philosophy, consciousness studies, and even culinary habits. To properly map the Radhasoami connection around the globe, it is necessary to show precisely how Shiv Dayal Singh's teachings directly or indirectly touched upon so many different fields of interest. In religion, for example, we can genealogically trace over 50 different movements back to the founder of Radhasoami, including groups like Ekankar that don't even consciously acknowledge their indebtedness. In literature, whole novels such as Paul Twitchell's Talons of Time and The Tiger's Fang have been published in Europe and North America that are based on the teachings of Shabd Yoga. In music, a significant number of recording artists, famous and not so well known, have been inspired by Sant Mat and have, in turn, incorporated what they admire into their lyrics and songs, such as Dave Mason's Mystic Traveller, that was reportedly inspired by his association with John Roger Hinkins, the founder of MSIA, who at one time alleged that he was spiritually connected to Sawan Singh of Radhasoami Satang Beas. In education and in industry, the Dayal Bagh Satsang in particular has been at the forefront of incorporating Shiv Dayal Singh's ethical values and spiritual aspirations into their manifold operations. In philosophy and consciousness studies, a number of scholars both in India and abroad have attempted to show how Sant Mat ideas on meditation can be open to scientific investigation and confirmation. Radhasoami's strict vegetarianism has dramatically altered the diet of millions. Several companies, such as Nature's Path and Amy's Foods, both founded expressly by satsangis, have been enormously successful in promoting a non-animal diet. Shiv Dayal Singh's influence has spread to almost all countries throughout the world. It is remarkable to reflect back on how a relatively obscure sage living in a small home in Panegali in the 19th century would touch the lives of millions in the 21st century. This chapter is an attempt to vividly graph the wide impact that the founder of Radhasoami has had in three distinct areas: vegetarianism, literature, and consciousness studies. The lacto-vegetarian diet. Perhaps the greatest single ethical influence that Shiv Dayal Singh and the whole of the Radhasoami movement, and the vast majority of those with an acknowledged genealogical connection, has had is in the movement's adherence to a strict lacto-vegetarian diet. A number of satsangis throughout the world, but quite prominently in North America, have developed very successful business enterprises in the food industry that have produced a diverse range of vegetarian-related products. For instance, Aaron Stephens, an initiate of Kirpal Singh, founder of Ruhani Satsang in Delhi, and who was a close disciple of Sawan Singh of Radhasoami Satsang Beas, created an organic cereal company entitled Nature's Path in 1985. It sells only vegetarian products and is one of the most successful natural food companies in North America, earning over millions annually. I don't suspect that most people who buy Nature's Path products, they have over 150 and counting, suspect that the reason none of their ingredients contain animal products, not even eggs, is due to Aaron Stephens' steadfast devotion to his guru, Kirpal Singh, 1894 to 1974, whose philosophical outlook was fundamentally shaped by Shiv Dayal Singh's ethical teachings. Kirpal Singh's grandson and eventual successor, Rajendra Singh, who is closely connected with Aaron Stephens and his family, explains in a nutshell Nature's Path's philosophy in The Compassionate Diet, as proposed by Aaron Steffens, is a blueprint to better health for body, mind, spirit, and the planet. It makes a compelling case for a simple life change through what we eat and how we fulfill the heart's innate desire for compassion. Vegetarianism is good for our health. It reduces the risk of disease, and it is ecologically and economically beneficial for our planet. While one may be completely unaware of Radhasoami, the fact remains that the eating habits of millions are being influenced by its core ethic, ahimsa, towards animals. Another very successful vegetarian business that was directly influenced by the teachings of Radhasoami is Amy's Foods, which was started by Andy and Rachel Berliner in 1987 and named after their daughter. Founded in Petaluma, California, with headquarters in Santa Rosa, this is one of the largest organic frozen food companies in the world. Both Andy and Rachel were initiated by the late Charan Singh, 1916 to 1990, of Radhasoami Satsang Beas, and have also developed one of the first drive-through vegetarian fast food outlets in California. The company has become quite lucrative and now has many of its products in mainstream supermarkets throughout North America. Amy's food philosophy is simple at its core, as explained in an article by Civil Eats on the company. The couple started Amy's Kitchen in 1987 when they developed a frozen vegetarian pot pie out of their kitchen in Petaluma, California, a Northern California town that remains the company's headquarters. 27 years later, the company has grown an average of 30% a year, according to Andy Berliner. With processing plants in Oregon, Santa Rosa, and Idaho, and nearly 2,000 employees, it has evolved into one of the biggest-selling frozen food and canned soup companies in the U.S. Since Amy's Kitchen isn't publicly traded and is family-owned and operated, exact sales figures aren't public knowledge. But on a 2012 episode of How I Made My Millions, the Berliners said the company earned upwards of $300 million in sales that year. 3 years later, that number has shot up to $500 million, according to a senior manager in communications. At a time when other companies are working hard to remove genetically engineered and other highly processed ingredients from their menus, Amy's drive-thru, by virtue of the parent company's history, has an upper hand. We haven't changed. Organic, vegetarian, and non-GMO is who we are, says Berliner. Another Charan Singh initiate, Jim Rosen, who now serves as a representative for Gurinder Singh, 1954. Charan's designated successor founded Fantastic World Foods more than 30 years ago. This company, too, focuses exclusively on providing vegetarian products such as falafel and hummus mixes, etc. In an early interview in Vegetarian Times, Rosen explains the ethics behind founding his company. I wouldn't be happy if I had to have a job that didn't reflect my vegetarian values. Each of these three companies, Nature's Path, Amy's Foods, and Fantastic World Foods, has made vegetarianism much more acceptable and widestream among Americans, even if many of its customers are still meat eaters. Loving Hut, the famous vegan restaurant chain, has over 140 cafes around the world. It was founded and inspired by Ching Hai, who was born in Vietnam in 1950 and, though from a Catholic and Buddhist background, eventually received initiation from the controversial Sant Mat guru Thakur Singh, 1929 to 2005. Though later she tried to distance herself from him by claiming instead that she was a disciple of some unnamed and unknown Himalayan guru. Thakur Singh was an initiate of Kirpal Singh and eventually emerged as one of his disputed successors. Qinghai advocates a vegan diet and has been instrumental in spreading the ideal of an ahimsa lifestyle around the world, but particularly among Vietnamese and Chinese communities in Europe, America, and Australia. Charles Lang, owner of The Loving Hut in Claremont, California, explains the spiritual philosophy underlying Qinghai's commitment to spreading veganism. Most important is saving lives, loving animals, loving others, loving yourself, Liang told me. Everything connects with one another. Everything has vibrations. Nature is the best magic to maintain everything. That's why my restaurant is organic vegan and not just vegan. There are a number of other vegetarian companies that have emerged during the past century which have been inspired by other Indian gurus, such as Swami Bhaktivedanta Prabhupada, founder of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, Paramahansa Yogananda, founder of the Self-Realization Fellowship, and Yogi Bhajan, founder of the Healthy, Happy and Holy Organization, 3HO. Each of these organizations has spread the idea of vegetarianism via a large network of restaurants and food companies. The textual influence. Professor Mark Juergensmeyer and I were asked by Oxford University Press to submit an annotated bibliography for scholars and other interested researchers on Radhasoami. Although we both had done earlier work in this area, Oxford wanted it updated and condensed to serve more as an overall guide than a fully elaborate and extensive list of all the pertinent literature. This turned out, ironically, to be a more difficult task, since which books to include or which to exclude forced us to think deeply about what was elemental and what may be considered secondary. Needless to say, it was not an exact science. However, as I was working on this project with Professor Juergensmeyer, it got me thinking about the enormous influence that Shiv Dayal Singh and his philosophy has had on spiritual literature. I am especially intrigued by those individuals and movements which utilized Swamiji Maharaj's teachings, but who wished to not properly acknowledge it. Although Shabd Yoga has been known and taught for centuries, as my wife, Dr. Andrea Diem, has duly noted in the previous chapter, it must be acknowledged that Shiv Dayal Singh's clear exposition of the practice of Surat Shabd Yoga and the ethical superstructure underlining its efficacy has been pivotal in making this spiritual method more accessible and in so doing eventually influencing millions of Sikhs across the globe. It is an interesting, even if ultimately non-conclusive exercise amongst historians to imagine what would happen if a significant figure, a politician, a scientist, a religious prophet, in the past didn't exist. In the 19th century, this was called by the decidedly sexist and today outdated phrase, the great man theory, wherein personal charisma and power is such so as to fundamentally alter the course of history. Looking back at the origins of Radhasoami, it is quite obvious that Shiv Dayal Singh had a tremendous impact on those who knew him, particularly those who were closely aligned with his ministry, such as his wife, Radhaji, his younger brother, Pratap Singh, and his chief successor, Rai Saligram. These individuals in turn influenced others who spread the teachings of their guru far and wide. Perhaps there could also be an argument made for the great books theory, where certain core texts, like the authors who penned them, have an outsized influence that far exceeds initial expectations or their initial print runs. This seems certainly to be the case with Shiv Dayal Singh's book, Sarbakan, both the prose and poetry volumes, which was published 6 years after his death under the auspices of his younger brother, Pratap Singh, known affectionately as Chachaji, and Rai Saligram, later more honorifically entitled Huza Maharaj. One of the greatest merits of Sarbakan, prose volume, is its remarkable clarity. Anyone who reads that book, even if not at all well versed in Indian thought, would come away with 3 core ideas: the necessity of a living guru, the importance of Shabd Yoga, and the incalculable benefit of satsang. Sarbakan, poetry, though too quite clear in its message, provides Shiv Dayal Singh's spiritual ideas in beautiful poetic verse, which provides the reader with a rich array of metaphor and emotion. Interestingly, even an offshoot guru such as Paul Twitchell, the founder of Ekankar, referred to Sarbakan as his Bible, even though later he tried to disavow how deeply indebted his group was to Shiv Dayal Singh's teachings. This raises the intriguing issue of how and why certain books have a much greater influence than others. It has been over 134 years since Sarbakan was first published in Hindi. It has subsequently been reprinted numerous times and translated into several languages, including English. From this core text, a number of other Radhasoami texts have emerged from the field and become highly instrumental. First on this list, after Sarbakan in terms of impact, I suggest is Rai Saligram's Radhasoami Mat Prakash, first published in English in Benares in 1896 by Chandraprabha Press Company. This small text of only 96 pages contains the essence of Radhasoami in extremely lucid prose, so much so that more than 30 years later it prompted Dr. Julian P. Johnson to seek initiation into Radhasoami. Johnson was effusive in his praise for the text. Returning by the inland Pacific Highway, I stopped in Ashland, Oregon, to visit an old lady, Julia R. McQuilkin, whom I had known and loved for 25 years. She was then nearing her 80th milestone in life's journey, but her brain was active and her soul radiant. She had lived a long life of useful deeds. Almost the first thing I noticed on entering her sitting room, lying there on her library table, was a copy of Radhasoami Mat Prakash. It struck me peculiarly. I began to read, and one of the first paragraphs my eyes fell upon read, "The Supreme Being is a boundless ocean of spirit or love, and the human being a drop or current of spirit or love from this ocean. And love being the very essence and means of existence of the whole creation, it follows that no effort in any direction, temporal or spiritual, unless actuated by love or affectionate regard, can be crowned with success and the work or labor rendered easy, sweet, and harmonious." Strangely enough, here was my ocean of love in which I had been baptized, and in the very same paragraph a complete and perfect explanation as to why I had failed in so many of my undertakings. It came with the force of a personal message from the skies. I continued to read. When lunch was ready, I fed myself with one hand while I held on to the book with the other. I asked questions. Finally, when the little volume had been read through the second time, I asked my friend where she had obtained it. In all philosophical and occult literature there was nothing like it. It carried a different message. My beloved hostess smiled and said that it was an exposition of the teachings of a master in India. Before Julian Johnson, 1873 to 1939, was killed by the famous mountaineer Paul Petzold in an unfortunate accident at the Dera, he wrote several books on Radhasoami from his perspective as an initiate of Sawan Singh, successor of Jaimal Singh at Beas, who was himself an initiate of Shiv Dayal Singh. These included helping Siwa Singh on an English translation of Sarbakan, prose, with a great master in India, a compilation of edited letters he wrote back to satsangis in the United States, Call of the East, his own autobiography, The Unquenchable Flame, a pseudo-autobiography of his wife, Elizabeth Bruce, who he met in India, and his most famous book, The Path of the Masters. It can be argued that Johnson's The Path of the Masters is the most popular book in Radhasoami history not written by one of the acknowledged leaders in the tradition. Johnson never saw the book in its final completed form, which was first published in France in a very limited edition of only 200 copies, due to his unfortunate demise. It has subsequently gone through many editions and many reprintings, reaching an iconic status within Sant Mat circles. The Path of the Masters and With a Great Master in India also hold the dubious distinction of being two of the most widely plagiarized books in the past 78 years in spiritual circles. For example, Dr. Bhagat Singh Thinn's 1939 book, Radiant Road to Reality, contains a number of appropriated passages from Johnson's 1934 text, With a Great Master in India, without any attributions whatsoever. Paul Twitchell's 1970 tome, The Far Country, cribbed so much from Johnson's two books that it had to be withdrawn from circulation by Ekankara's current leader, Harold Klemp. The third spiritual leader of the Radhasoami faith in Agra, Brahm Sankar Misra, honorifically known as Maharaj Saheb, began work on a book, Discourses on the Radhasoami Faith, that would present the teachings of Radhasoami in a more scientific light, appealing mostly to an educated and literate Western audience. Although it was never completed, B.P. Day in Benares published it in partial form 2 years after Misra's death on October 12, 1907. The 1941 introduction to the book explains how the work came about. About the end of the year 1906, he, Brahm Sankar Misra, had to return rather hurriedly to Benares on account of the serious illness of his eldest brother, which terminated in his demise. Early in 1907, he shifted permanently to Benares while still on leave. While continuing in indifferent health, he, shortly after his removal to Benares, commenced dictating the book which follows. The portions, as fared out, were read to him, and he often made revisions, sometimes though sparingly, in his own handwriting. This went on with frequent interruptions owing to his failing health till about the beginning of September, when, owing to aggravation in his illness, the dictation of the book, though yet incomplete, and its revision, which had already been taken in hand, had to be stopped altogether. The contents of the book, as they are, have, however, a value of their own for the satsangis, and are looked upon by them as an inestimable treasure. Discourses on the Radhasoami faith, despite being only partially finished, has been formidable in shaping how the teachings of Shiv Dayal Singh can be presented in a more modern and scientific manner. Indeed, I would suggest that both Rai Saligram and Brahm Sankar Misra are the two key architects who have done the most in presenting Radhasoami in a more logical and systematic format, foregoing much of the mythological and metaphorical language that is endemic in early Nirguna Bhakti writings. In terms of biographical details surrounding the life and work of Shiv Dayal Singh, one book stands out amongst the rest, and that is Pratap Singh's biography of him entitled Jiwan Charitra Swamiji Maharaj, which was later translated into English by Sant Das Maheshwari, former assistant to the last publicly recognized living guru at Swami Bagh, Madhav Prasad Sinha. Pratap's biography of Swamiji Maharaj is the key resource for most of the information we have about his life and work, especially the details concerning his last days before his departure and the instructions he gave about the future guidance of his Sangat. Almost every book referencing Shiv Dayal Singh includes material from Jiwan Charitra Swamiji Maharaj. The most controversial books relating to Radhasoami and its contentious history were written and privately published by Sant Das Maheshwari during the 1950s to the 1980s, who has long been affiliated with Swami Bagh. These include his Radhasoami Faith, History and Tenets, Truth Unvarnished in 2 parts, and the multi-set volumes of Correspondence with Certain Americans. Although Maheshwari has provided a wealth of valuable material and documents, see Holy Epistles, Volume 1 and 2, over the years, his writing is often marred by his polemical and combative style. Other branches of Radhasoami have tried to contravene Maheshwari's oblique view of succession with their own historical surveys. Outstanding contributions here include the invaluable Souvenir in commemoration of the first centenary of the Radhasoami Satsang, 1861 to 1961, which provides an important timeline concerning the evolution of the Dayal Bagh Satsang. Agam Prasad Mathur, the great-grandson of Rai Saligram and the present spiritual master at Pipal Mandi in Agra, did his doctoral dissertation on the history of Radhasoami that was later published by Vikas Publishers in Delhi in 1973 under the title Radhasoami Faith, a Historical Study. This book has reached a large audience and has been widely cited by academics. However, it was not until Professor Mark Juergensmeyer published his groundbreaking study Radhasoami Reality, The Logic of a New Religion, Princeton University Press, 1991, that Radhasoami received a genuinely impartial history of its various branches by an academic not affiliated with any of the satsangs and who is himself not an initiate. Almost all the histories that have been done on Radhasoami, even if valuable and attempting to be impartial, have been written by those with some personal ties to one or more satsangs. This includes my own work, The Radhasoami Tradition, and Daniel Gould's excellent study, The Guru as Lord. Surprisingly, the one book that may have introduced more readers to Radhasoami around the world than any other, particularly from the 1930s to the 1960s, was Paul Brunton's A Search in Secret India, which includes a very laudatory account of his interview with Anand Swarup, Sahabji Maharaj, in a chapter respectfully entitled The Garden of the Lord. Brunton's breezy account of his travels throughout India, meeting many gurus, sages and saints, became an instant success and an international bestseller, and is still in print some 84 years later. While Brunton's chapter on the famed sage Ramana Maharshi of Arunachala has received the most attention, his section on Dayal Bagh and his impressions of Sahabji Maharaj have been read and appreciated by thousands over the years. Brunton is effusive in his praise of the spiritual leader, which becomes apparent to the reader at the end of the chapter where he writes, Sahabji Maharaj rises to depart. Something awakens in me before his disciples can come and capture him. It breaks my reserve, ignores my Western pride, crushes my anti-religious temperament, and speaks through my lips. Your Holiness, may I have your blessing? He turns with a friendly smile, beams pleasantly through his glasses, and cordially pats my shoulder. You have that already, he assures me in farewell. I return to my compartment and the train moves rapidly away. Dun-coloured fields flash by the window. Little groups of drowsy-eyed cattle munch contentedly on the sparse herbage. My eyes register them only half-consciously, for my mind is carrying away a picture of a notable man, whom I greatly like and profoundly admire, for he is at once an inspired dreamer, a serenely minded yogi, a practical man of the world, and a polished gentleman. Radhasoami Satsang Beas has probably been the most prolific publisher of Sant Mat and Radhasoami materials amongst the various branches. They have published hundreds of titles in more than 35 languages with a major focus on English publications. The current leader of the movement, Gurinder Singh, Babaji, has not authored any book in his nearly 30-year tenure, though he has been intimately involved with which books are accepted and printed. The previous guru in the lineage, Charan Singh Maharaj Ji, has a number of books attributed to him, but these are usually taped transcriptions of his satsangs and various questions and answers with his followers. Popular titles of his include Die to Live, Divine Light, The Path, and Treasure Beyond Measure, which contains revealing and frank excerpts from his personal diaries and letters. Treasure Beyond Measure was edited with commentary by Shanti Sethi, who was assisted in the task by John Davidson. It was published just 2 months before Charan Singh died and has become an important source of information about how he became appointed as Yagat Singh's successor and his diffidence in accepting the leadership of the Beas Satsang. Charan Singh's grandfather and guru, Sawan Singh, also inspired a number of books, including Spiritual Gems, which contains a series of letters that he dictated to his American followers from 1911 until his death in 1948. There is some controversy over Sawan Singh's 2-volume work, Gurmat Siddhant, which Kirpal Singh, a close disciple of the Guru, who would later start his own separate group, Ruhani Satsang, in Delhi, claimed to be the real author. This text, later translated in parts in English under the title Philosophy of the Masters, has also become a popular work explaining the ins and outs of Shabd Yoga practice. 2 of Kirpal Singh's most famous books are Crown of Life and Naam, or Word, both of which have been widely read and distributed throughout North America and Europe. A number of new religious leaders who have formed their own distinct movements and who have in the process distanced themselves from Radhasoami per se and have created their own parampara replete with mythological figures have written highly successful books that have been directly inspired by the teachings of Shiv Dayal Singh. At the forefront of this assemblage, of course, is Paul Twitchell, whose numerous books became New Age bestsellers in the late 1960s and 1970s, including his novelistic voyage through the inner regions called The Tiger's Fang. John Roger Hinkins, founder of the movement of spiritual inner awareness, even penned a book called The Sound Current, and Gary Olson, who formed Master Path in the 1980s, has published a large series of books, some of which were directly lifted word by word from Charan Singh and Yagat Singh respectively. Ching Hai, the controversial Sant Mat-related guru from Vietnam, has popularized Shabd Yoga practice in a large array of books, pamphlets and magazines, calling the method Kuan Yin. Today, after the invention of the World Wide Web by Tim Berners-Lee in 1989, we have witnessed an explosion of Shabd Yoga material ranging from PDFs to YouTube videos, most of which has its roots in the life and teachings of Shiv Dayal Singh, even if creators of such materials either don't acknowledge his influence or remain dutifully unaware of it. In light of new technologies such as virtual reality and augmented reality, one can only wonder how Shabd Yoga teachings will be presented in the future and in what format. What is certain, however, is that Shiv Dayal Singh has played a much larger role than anyone might have predicted when he commenced his first public satsang in 1861. Consciousness Studies. Shiv Dayal Singh's scathing criticism of various religions is prevalent throughout his writings, both in prose and in poetry, and has caused much consternation among devotees of those faiths who, though attracted to Radhasoami, were upset by such attacks. Baba Fakir Chand, 1886 to 1981, remarked on this in his autobiography, The Unknowing Sage, wherein he explained his own hurtful reaction. I reached the ashram of Hazur Datta Dayal Ji, Shiv Brat Lai, and prostrated my humble self at his holy feet. He gave me an exceptionally affectionate welcome and initiated me into Radhasoami Mat. His Holiness gave me a book and asked me to go through it. The work was Sabak Khan, written by Shiv Dayal Singh, the founder of Radhasoami. I went through some pages of the book in the very presence of Hazur Datta Dayal Ji, but I could not pursue it any further, though, because Shiv Dayal Singh had most vehemently criticized almost every religion, including Vedanta, Sufism, Islam, Jainism, and Buddhism. He declared them all to be Kal, death, and Maya, illusion. It was too much for me. I felt hurt, and tears rolled down my eyes. His Holiness noticed my reaction and inquired for the reason. I broke out, "Hazur, God is one. I have failed to understand the justification for condemning all other religions as incomplete. This is a direct attack on the religion of my ancestors." Hazur very lovingly advised me, "Keep aside this book and never read it until I ask you to read it." Maharishi instead gave me 2 other books, one on the life history of his guru, Rai Saligram Ji, and the other by Kabir Sahib, entitled Kabir Sakhi. He advised me to attend the satsangs, meetings of Radhasoami Mat, wherever available. Years later, however, Baba Fakir Chand came to realize the truth that Shiv Dayal Singh was driving home. Swamiji Maharaj was arguing that there was a higher truth that these religions, caught as they are with rituals and dogmas, don't realize, and because of this, devotees become ensnared and don't progress further. Shiv Dayal Singh, like other radical thinkers before him, such as the iconoclasts Kabir and Socrates, was forcing his listeners to doubt what they thought they knew. He was inspiring his followers to be skeptics in the true sense of the word by thinking over and considering with reason what they had previously only accepted blindly. I would suggest it was precisely because of Shiv Dayal Singh's critical outlook that his immediate and future successors have attempted to demythologize the practice of Surat Shabd Yoga. Essentially, they have developed a pathway where Radhasoami practices can be understood scientifically. Today this has become much more evident when we see the great efforts of Dayal Bagh, under the guidance of its present leader, Prem Saran Satsangi, has made to allow Radhasoami yogic methods to be studied scientifically and not merely be accepted dogmatically. Even Radhasoami Satsang Beas desires to be viewed less as a religion and more as systematic and rational procedure with testable results. It has even gone so far as to advise itself as Science of the Soul Research Center. Along these lines, Dayal Bagh has gone out of its way to sponsor conferences on consciousness studies, and many of its adherents, including its revered leader, have published a number of important studies on neuroscience and quantum theory and their relation to higher states of awareness that can be achieved through the meditational discipline of Shabd Yoga. Simply put, Radhasoami wants to be taken seriously as a science alongside other disciplines such as physics, chemistry, and psychology. This is best illustrated by Prem Saran Satsangi's continued efforts to open Radhasoami ideas to a wider scientific audience. For instance, he has proposed a dynamic new theory for exploring the interface between neurology and higher states of consciousness. As he explains, it may be recalled that neurophenomenology integrates subjective experience with the brain dynamics in the rapidly emerging field of neuroscience of consciousness. This talk proposes a tentative hypothesis for likely hierarchical order theory of consciousness, HOT consciousness, purporting to integrate subjective experiences of consciousness with scientific observations of their spiritual, cognitive, and neuro-environmental correlates, abbreviated as SCANE correlates. One distinguishing feature of reported investigations is that phenomenology relied upon is based on the first-person subjective experiences of scientist investigators themselves, in contrast with the general trend of supporting evidence in phenomenology of a third-person kind. The running theme throughout Shiv Dayal Singh's writings is one of systematically doubting what had previously been revered as the highest truth. Instead of relying on authorities of the past or relying on the purported achievements of others, he is arguing that the seeker must actually engage in the practice and experience for him or herself those higher states of consciousness. Religion, in other words, must turn away from mere speculation and evolve into verifiable and testable path. Otherwise, it is no different than any other faith that merely relies on rituals, dogmas, and blind belief. Interestingly, with the emergence of cognitive science and the great progress made in brain mapping during the past 3 decades, consciousness studies has emerged as one of the most exciting and vibrant fields in science today. It is no longer regarded as occult or non-academic. Indeed, understanding the hard problem of self-reflective awareness, why do I see and feel the world subjectively, is now at the very forefront of neuroscience. Radhasoami is primed to contribute to this field because of its clear exposition of Surat Shabd Yoga, which is a very systematic meditational technique that can allow practitioners to explore the vagaries of their own awareness. Moreover, it is possible that Shabd Yoga meditators can be studied objectively by analyzing their brainwave patterns while practicing Simran, Dhyan, and Bhajan. Dayal Bagh is the one branch of Radhasoami that is at the forefront of scientifically studying Shabd Yoga and its relationship to higher states of consciousness. Thinking back to when Shiv Dayal Singh lived, who we are told had only initiated several thousand disciples during his lifetime, it is remarkable to reflect on how influential he has been around the world. Not only has his teachings inspired millions to turn vegetarian and live more ethical lives, but he modernized and streamlined the ancient practice of Surat Shabd Yoga, making it much more accessible to the modern, which no longer wants to be tied down to religious traditions and dogmatic authority. We are gathered here at Dayal Bagh in Agra to celebrate Shiv Dayal Singh's 200th birth anniversary, and it is truly remarkable to note that he is more popular and relevant today than ever before. He has taken Shabd Yoga mysticism out of its woolly past and made it possible to be scientifically understood and practiced, even amongst those who may regard themselves as agnostics in all matter religious. This is a remarkable achievement and is a tremendous contribution to our deeper understanding of consciousness and what potentials it has in store for us. Radhasoami. Appendix 1. The Future of Meditation. How Technological Augmentation Will Advance Interior Exploration. I have been practicing meditation now for over 50 years, yet it was only last week that I first tried a portable electroencephalogram EEG machine to study my brainwave patterns while doing Shabd Yoga, an ancient technique that focuses on listening to subtle sounds while sitting still. After teaching my Monday class in the sociology of religion, my colleague, Dr. Joshua Knapp from the psychology department, came to my office and said he wanted me to try Muse, the popular brain-sensing headband. It is very simple to use and connects seamlessly with one's smartphone and purportedly records your brainwaves in 3 distinct modes: active, neutral, and calm. After a 5-minute session, for instance, which begins with a brief calibration and short introduction, it will produce a brain activity chart replete with how many minutes were spent calmly, neutrally, or actively. The fun part about the device is that it entices you to become as still as possible, since then a tiny bird sound emerges. Racking up more bird sounds is indicative of how deep you have gone into your meditation. Although it is a fairly rudimentary device, EEG machines have been used for a long time to study the brainwaves of meditators. Ken Wilber has even uploaded a YouTube video of himself sitting in bed using such a gadget. A number of commentators, however, have pointed out that Wilber, which is not untypical of him, has grossly exaggerated what he could achieve, claiming that he could stop his brainwaves at will, and that the machine he was using proved such. Yet a close analysis of the film shows that it is highly doctored, since instead of showing a complete video analysis, it is peppered with still screenshots, which is highly misleading, if not downright duplicitous, to say the least. Yet, ironically, I found Wilber's video highly instructive, since it warned me not to take my meditative sojourns via Muse too seriously, given the relatively crude state of our brain-reading technology. Yet I see great potential in these accessories, since they allow for real-time analytics and can serve as progressive markers with which meditators can better gauge more precisely what is transpiring during their meditation sittings. It is not a stretch to imagine that in the not-so-distant future, human gurus can either be replaced or greatly aided by meditation applications that are connected with artificially intelligent agents. Even with a simple device such as Muse, the feedback loop was instructive, and I tried out a few suggestive tests on the machine. Modern Shabd Yoga practice, most prominently used in Radhasoami and Sant Mat-related groups, employs a threefold technique: Simran, repetition of a name or names, mantra; Dhyan, contemplation, the darkness or light or guru's image within; and Bhajan, listening to the inner sound. So in a suggestive beta test, I wanted to see which of these three techniques would elicit the most bird chirps, which I am told can range from 1 to 59 within a 5-minute period. My hunch, or should I say hypothesis, was that Bhajan, if done successfully, would garner the most bird chirps, with Simran coming in a close second and Dhyan coming in a distant third. Mystics in this tradition, who are regarded as masters, usually advise meditating between 2 and 3 hours daily, with the majority of the time spent doing Simran and Dhyan, whereas 30 or so minutes should be done in Bhajan exclusively. For the purposes of my trial runs, I decided to follow Muse's instruction of doing a short 5-minute session at first. In each test I conducted, I focused on one technique only. Of course, it goes without saying that my experiments are only suggestive hints and shouldn't be construed as scientific. To the contrary, they merely represent potential avenues for further investigation. I was a bit surprised, though, when after 15 trials, the best results I got were indeed while doing Bhajan. Now, undoubtedly, there can be several reasons for this, including confirmation bias. But this got me to thinking that with portable and relatively cheap EEG machines becoming more widely available, it can allow for widespread testing of various meditational methods that are more far-ranging than Shabd Yoga's threefold process. Hatha Yoga immediately comes to mind, especially with its emphasis on pranayama, breath restraint, mudras, hand gestures, and asanas, body postures. But meditational disciplines are not limited to yoga, since the world's religions have developed all sorts of concentrative practices, ranging from Sufi dancing to the Jesus prayer in Christian Orthodox churches. The more widespread these augmented technologies become, we will be able to develop vast databases, quantifying which techniques seem to work best and under what circumstances. Already a number of studies have been conducted using Muse, but focusing on education, not meditation. As the MedTech Boston website explained, at the University of Victoria and New York University, researchers are using the device to conduct pedagogical neuroscience research by investigating whether educational outcomes can be improved by better understanding students' brain activity. They roll out Muse in their research projects to 20 or 30 students at a time, simultaneously in a classroom, explains Moffat. They're looking at different brain states and how they affect learning, and whether or not they can improve their teaching methods on the basis of what is engaging to students and when students start to drop off. The Muse research website lists 9 examples of ongoing research connected with the brainwave reading headband, including attentional and affective consequences of technology-supported mindfulness, a randomized trial. Dr. Norman Farb's laboratory at the University of Toronto showed that 6 weeks regular use of Muse in healthy adults resulted in improvements in attention as well as reduced somatic symptoms, headaches, pain, discomfort, etc., on the brief symptom inventory. Characterizing population EEG dynamics throughout adulthood. A study by researchers at McMaster University involving more than 6,000 participants found population-level effects in brain data related to age and gender, giving scientists unparalleled resolution into how EEG brain dynamics change with age. Novel speed of learning effects detected in neurofeedback. A study by Dr. Randy McIntosh's lab at the Rotman Research Institute demonstrated previously unreported speed of learning effects in My Virtual Dream, a virtual neurofeedback environment powered by Muse. This effect, being subtle, was detectable only using a technology capable of testing a very large number of people, 600, in a short time, 12 hours. Neuroscientists study meditation-related changes in brain performance. Neuroscientists at the University of Victoria and the University of British Columbia use Muse in their field work in Nepal to study the brains of Buddhist monks who are highly expert meditators to better understand how training affects the way the brain makes decisions. Identifying pain with an adaptive brainwave learning system. Researchers at MIT and Harvard used machine learning to detect and distinguish signals associated with pain when participants wore Muse. Using Muse to measure event-related potentials outside the lab. At the University of Victoria in Canada, scientists are using Muse to measure event-related potentials, ERPs, in cognitive tasks. This research is also being applied to measure changes in decision-making in response to fatigue in ER doctors in the emergency room. Identifying mental states with machine learning. Researchers at the University of Memphis and IBM Watson Research Center found that by using machine learning to analyze brainwave signals from Muse while participants watched different videos, they could determine what type of content, emotional or educational, each participant was seeing. Vigilance lapse identification with Muse. Researchers from McMaster University used EEG machine learning tools to detect lapses in vigilance, sustained attention, state of participants wearing Muse. Integration of Muse with virtual reality. Students, scientists, and makers from around the world use Muse to create engaging and immersive experiences. One great example is Psychic VR, a virtual reality experience powered by Muse that was created by Judith Amores Fernandez, Patty May's and Javier Benavides' Palos, which won a Fast Company Innovation by Design award. I suspect that this very last study mentioned, integration of Muse with virtual reality, will be a game changer in the future, since it will allow meditators to be fully immersed into an environment that can potentially capture each of their senses, from seeing to hearing to even touching. I have been beta testing doing meditation in virtual reality with the recently released Oculus Go, a standalone VR device that is extraordinarily simple and easy to use. I have coupled Oculus Go with Muse, though a bit awkward at first, to see how they may work together and what kind of results they may portend. Back in the 1950s, John Lilly pioneered building deprivation tanks to see how the mind responds when lacking incoming stimuli. He augmented his water-immersed sessions with certain psychotropic drugs, and the results were startling. He experientially realized that the mind, when deprived of sights and sounds and smells, would by itself virtually create a kaleidoscope of wondrous hallucinations. Although Lilly would later begin to believe that such visions were more than passing phantasms, his friend and fellow sojourner, Richard Feynman, the noted Nobel Prize-winning physicist, disagreed and became convinced of their illusory nature. Yogis in the past would often put themselves in isolated environments so as to better focus within during their deep meditations and begin to produce a sophisticated phenomenology of what they encountered. One wonders if AI-connected concentration devices will be able to accelerate the learning curve of would-be meditators who don't follow a guru and don't live in a remote cave or forest and don't ingest psychedelic drugs. My own preliminary trials and errors in this arena suggest that devices such as Muse are indeed helpful, even if limited in their present incarnation. Perhaps in a decade or more we will have a plethora of digital gurus designed to help us turn within and who will be personally aligned with our own self-interests and help us better progress to our desired goals. The future of meditation can be based more on a scientific understanding and less on an outdated mythological one. The Tibetan cave of tomorrow can be constructed instantaneously with a VR and/or AR, and each of us can have our own spiritual teachers guiding us, even if they are wearing purely technological garb. Appendix 2. The Emergence of Radhasoami as a Transnational Religion. When Shiv Dayal Singh, the proclaimed founder of Radhasoami, first came out publicly in 1861 with his teachings, surely no outside observer would have imagined that he would be eventually responsible for an international movement which has today garnered well over 2 million followers. Part of the reason why nobody would have suspected such a thing to occur was primarily because Shiv Dayal Singh did not attempt to vigorously proselytize for new recruits. Indeed, he was circumspect about gathering disciples, demanding that whoever he initiated be steadfast in following a strict vegetarian diet, maintaining a high moral life, abstaining from alcohol and drugs, and engaging in 2 hours plus daily of Shabd Yoga meditation. Naturally, such requirements precluded a massive following in the beginning of Shiv Dayal Singh's ministry, especially when he forbade systematic advertisements for his newly founded satsang in Agra. What eventually transpired in Agra, however, was nothing less than remarkable. Starting with just a handful of disciples in the mid-1850s, Shiv Dayal Singh, more popularly known as Swamiji Maharaj, began to attract hundreds of disciples both from within and outside of Agra. Before his death in 1878, Swamiji's following is estimated to have been in the low thousands, with numbers ranging from 4 to 10,000 initiates. There are, to be sure, several factors which allowed Swamiji's satsang to flourish. Outstanding among these were 1. relative freedom from the British Raj to allow neo-Hindu movements to develop. 2. The popularity of alternative spiritual practices like Shabd Yoga, which could be practiced by any caste member. 3. Prominent disciples like Rai Saligram, who interested others in their guru. And 4. Shiv Dayal Singh's perceived charisma. Whatever combination of circumstances led to Shiv Dayal Singh's core following, it is evident that his initial constituency was solid and devoted. However, after his death, since there were no clear and univocal guidelines given about his successor, several disciples emerged as would-be successors. This led to a major split in the group which has never been mended. It has also led, ironically, to the rapid development of the Radhasoami movement outside of Agra. Shiv Dayal Singh's teachings were carried on by at least 6 successors. Radhaji, Swamiji's wife, who established her satsang in Pani Gali, Rai Saligram, who founded his satsang in Pipal Mandi, Sanmukh Das, who initiated sadhus at Somi Bagh, Garib Das, who started his satsang in Sarai Rohilla, Delhi, Pratap Singh, Swamiji's younger brother, who continued the satsang at Somi Bagh, and Jaimal Singh, who established his satsang in Beos in the Punjab. It seems likely that Shiv Dayal Singh's satsang would have remained relatively unknown in India if it had not been for the proliferation of his successors after his death. What each successor did, in effect, was establish a new centre by which Shiv Dayal Singh's teachings could be promulgated. This in turn guaranteed that Radhasoami teachings would reach more and more people, even if each centre had a slightly nuanced interpretation of Radhasoami doctrines. At first, during the 20 or so years after Shiv Dayal Singh's death, Rai Saligram's satsang was the most popular, eventually eclipsing his own guru's total numbers. The other satsangs were also relatively successful, particularly Jaimal Singh's in the Punjab, but they did not rival Saligram's in terms of absolute numbers. Saligram was instrumental in organizing Shiv Dayal Singh's teachings into a cohesive theology. He was chiefly responsible for publishing his guru's main text, Saba Khan, both prose and poetry, and for clearly articulating Radhasoami as an incarnational religion, nay, the supreme religion of all time. Although Saligram's theological interpretations of Radhasoami eventually led to a schism in the movement, he was nevertheless the key architect behind distinguishing Swamiji's message from other Nirguna Bhakti sants. Saligram achieved this by emphasizing Shiv Dayal Singh's unique character, arguing in one case, for instance, that Swamiji had no guru and was the greatest spiritual master of all time. What this did for Saligram's version of Radhasoami was demarcate it as something transcending mere santism. Radhasoami was, to be sure, entrenched with sant doctrines and even sant lineage. Shiv Dayal Singh had close ties with the Tulsi Sahib, but according to Saligram, it transcended altogether those affiliations. He argued that Swamiji was presenting a wholly new message to the world, one that did not rest upon the previous revelations of sants like Nanak or Kabir, but was rather unique to him. Swamiji, according to Rai Saligram, was the first complete incarnation of the Supreme Being ever manifested on earth. Now, it should be noted that not all of Shiv Dayal Singh's other disciples and other rival successors agreed with Saligram's theology. Jaimal Singh was particularly critical of Saligram and his absolutist posture toward their deceased guru. Yet Saligram's theology, however disputed, was instrumental in distinguishing Shiv Dayal Singh and his emerging panth from being too closely tied with lesser organized and lesser-known Sant-related movements like the Sat Namis or Tulsi Sahibis. What Saligram did for Radhasoami was similar to what St. Paul did for Christianity when he attempted to distinguish it from its Jewish moorings. Saligram let it emerge as a distinct religious tradition which, like Christianity, owed much to its predecessor, but nevertheless evolved into an autonomous movement. Thus, the emergence of Radhasoami from a local guru sect in Agra to a growing religious movement, numbering thousands of followers, resulted partly because of its splintering into several factions right after the death of its founder, Shiv Dayal Singh. It can be argued that Radhasoami owes much of its growth to its tendency to have multiple guru successors, even when those successors vehemently disagreed with one another over issues of legitimacy and authenticity. Clearly the most successful Radhasoami branch in the world is the Beas Satsang, with a following which surpasses all of the other satsangs combined. Jaimal Singh established his ministry in relative obscurity in the 1890s. The Beas Satsang, though, would not have even started had there been only one successor to Shiv Dayal Singh, which was universally accepted in Agra. It was precisely because there was more than one successor to Shiv Dayal Singh that allowed for groups like Beas to begin in the first place. Although succession schisms can eventually wear down a religion's growth later on, it does seem to have some potential benefits at the beginning, not the least of which is competition. Perhaps having a spiritual marketplace where potential seekers can choose from a host of slightly different gurus is conducive for a new religion to spread its teachings far and wide in a comparatively short period of time. Radhasoami is surely a case in point, since it has never been unified and has never shown any type of consistent harmony. Thus, by the turn of the 20th century, Radhasoami had splintered into at least 6 major camps, with special minority groups emerging. These included Pipal Mandi, the Allahabad Satsang, later to be known as Soami Bagh when it moved back to Agra proper, the Beas Satsang, eventually headed by Sawan Singh, the Tan Taran Satsang, headed by Bhaga Singh, the Sarai Rohilla Satsang, headed by Garib Das, and Shiv Brat Lal's Lahore Satsang. Hence, within just 25 years from Shiv Dayal Singh's death, Radhasoami gurus and their teachings had spread throughout North India, mostly as the result of an increasing fractionalization within the movement. By the turn of the 19th century, certain Radhasoami leaders in Agra wanted to curtail the increasing factionalization and its attendant infighting. The most prominent leader in Agra at that time was Brahm Shankar Misra, the disputed successor of Rai Saligram. He formed a central administrative council in 1902 with the help of several prominent Agra Satsangis, including Swamiji's younger brother Partap Singh. The aim of the council was to unify the various branch organizations under a centralized administration in Agra. The result of this endeavor, however, was disastrous. As Mark Juergensmeyer notes in his study, Radhasoami Reality, the idea of a council never really worked. From the outset, Jaimal Singh rejected the authority of Misra to give initiations, balked at the notion of turning over his records to the council, and refused to be subjected to its judgments. Thus, instead of the council leading to a reunification of Radhasoami under one president and one guiding body, it led to even more schisms, including the most acrimonious one in Radhasoami's history, the split between Kamta Prasad Sinha and Maheshwari Devi Babu Prasad Sinha. This split later evolved into a contentious and decades-long lawsuit between Dayal Bagh and Soami Bagh, the original genealogical descendants of the original divorce, over worship rights at the Samad and Radhasoami's founder Shiv Dayal Singh. What such divisions did for Radhasoami's growth is perhaps the opposite of what our common sense might at first suspect. It would seem on the surface that a group's survival, especially if it is still in its infancy, depends more or less on keeping its unity and focus. But this is not always the case, and this was certainly not the case in any stage in Radhasoami's collective history. Contrary to our common-sense notions of how successful religions evolve over time, Radhasoami and groups like it grow exponentially by being periodically hammered by factionalization. In other words, the proliferation of gurus and outlying satsang groups appears to be a very viable way to spread its teachings quickly and comprehensively. To draw a limited analogy from molecular biology, new religions can succeed if they are able to replicate themselves in many different fashions, even if those same replications break away eventually from the very nucleus from which they started. Therefore, to understand the emergence of Radhasoami as a transnational religion, one must first understand that the group from its very inception was prone to produce offshoots, which in turn produced further offshoots, and so on. What keeps Radhasoami so vital and so popular today, I would argue, is not its unity or its systematic doctrines, but rather its inclination for diversity. That diversity is primarily in the form of new gurus, new satsangs, and new teachings. To be sure, there are certain core features which seem to be recurrent within each succeeding guru and group, but there are new and fresh nuances which allow Radhasoami to adapt to its newfound environment. The following is a schematic outline of exactly how Radhasoami has flourished by its diversity and how, in turn, it developed into a transnational religion. Geographical displacement. The first requirement for a local guru movement to move beyond its neighborhood is such an obvious one that it seems a bit silly to even mention it. Geographical displacement. That is, the guru and his/her ministry must either attract followers from outside or have their core constituency spread the teachings beyond their particular locales. In the case of Shabd Singh, both events occurred. He attracted followers from outside of Agra and also had followers spread his teachings to major cities in North India. Yet even this is a relatively slow and cumbersome method, especially if all lines of influence must intersect with the original centre in Panigali or Somi Bagh in Agra. But after the death of Shabd Singh in 1878, all of this was changed because there were now multiple successors, each of whom established different ministerial bases. Thus, instead of one line of intersection, there were now at least 6. And after the death of these successors, there were even more offshoots, each of which in turn bred more branches. The outcome is that today it is almost impossible to accurately track down all of the Radhasoami-related groups in India, much less the world. The number of Radhasoami-related gurus is well over several hundred, and even that number is a conservative underestimation. For instance, in Arizona in the United States, a place thousands of miles removed from Agra, there are now at least 5 Americans who claim to be living gurus in the Shabd Yoga tradition with a genealogical, theological connection with Radhasoami. If Arizona has that many gurus, one can only guess how many the Punjab or Uttar Pradesh has. So, geographical displacement serves as a catalyst to allow new gurus to set up shop. It is as if Darwin's understanding of the origin of species also applies, although in a limited and perhaps merely metaphorical fashion, to the origin of new gurus. Space limits competition, allowing for only a limited number of winners. In our case, the access to more space, to new towns, to new cities, to new states, to new countries, allows for a lot more winners and, temporarily at least, a lot less head-to-head competition. This has certainly been the case for Radhasoami, where the most successful groups have been those which have conquered new territory. The Beos satsang is now completely separated from the parent satsang at Somi Bagh, but it nevertheless boasts 15 times more followers than its predecessor. Even a marginally connected satsang like Master Ching Hai's she was initiated by Thakur Singh but later denied it, has more disciples than Dayal Bagh, Somi Bagh and Pipal Mandi combined. And she started her ministry in Taiwan. Clearly, Qinghai's success has much to do with her ability to tap into a market which has not yet been touched by other Shabd Yoga gurus. Indeed, the vast majority of her following have never even heard of the name Radhasoami or Sant Mat. The fact that Qinghai's books are available in Chinese and Vietnamese has allowed her to reach a large audience that would otherwise not have access to Sant Mat-related teachings. What we have here, of course, is extensive replication, but replication aided by geographical displacement. With such an abundance of space, at least for the foreseeable future, Radhasoami-related gurus have, more or less, free rein to mark out their chosen area and make some significant headway. This has happened even in places like Lagos, Nigeria, where a guru named Bambe Baba, yes, the name is real, who was once a follower of an Indian Radhasoami guru, now commands thousands of devotees. Below is a partial listing by geographical location of the more visible Radhasoami-related movements in the world. Keep in mind that the list represents less than 10% of all Radhasoami groups. Agra, Uttar Pradesh, India. Somi Bagh, Dayal Bagh, Pipal Mandi. Delhi, India. Kirpal Light Satsang, Sant Bani, Sawan Kirpal Mission. Punjab, India. Radhasoami Association, Tan Taran. Dera Baba Jaimal Singh, Beos. Radhasoami, Firozpur. Manavta Mandir, Hoshiarpur. United States. Ruhani Satsang, Inc. Sonic Spectrum, Master Path, Ekankar, MSIA, Sant Bani Ashram, The Divine Science of Light and Sound. The Gutenberg Revolution. Printed books. The first Radhasoami book to be widely published and circulated was Shiv Dayal Singh's Sarbakhan Radhasoami Chand Band in 1884. This book was instrumental in spreading the teachings of Radhasoami to hundreds of people throughout India. Indeed, it can be argued that the reason Shiv Dayal Singh's teachings became popular in the first place was due to Saligram's persistent efforts to set into type what had only been available to a close coterie of disciples via letters and word of mouth. What the Gutenberg Revolution did for Christianity is well known, but what it has done for fledgling guru movements is less documented. Radhasoami's rapid spread throughout India is due in part to Saligram's efforts to print his guru's teachings in accessible Hindi. Even Saligram himself started a fortnightly journal entitled Prem Patra, which carried elements of his guru's teachings as well as his own. What this accomplished was twofold. First, it empowered distant satsangis who did not have access to their guru's daily satsang to share in and understand his teachings. Second, it allowed outlying satsangs to be conducted by chosen representatives who could utilize the growing literature as a basis for their talks. Thus, by this very simple means, Radhasoami was able to move beyond its parochial boundaries and find an audience throughout India and eventually throughout Europe, North America, and elsewhere. There is still something magical about the printed word. It lends credentials and legitimacy to those who may possess neither. Perhaps the quickest way for a guru who has no clear appointed title to garner one is to write and print a book. Once a book is printed, it lends a certain aura of respectability to the guru and his/her ministry, even if that guru has absolutely no legal basis for claiming the title of Sant or Maharaj or Satguru. I would argue that this modus operandi for legitimacy is much more prevalent among would-be gurus in the Radhasoami tradition than most insiders would suspect. For instance, the most prolific author in Radhasoami's history was Shiv Brat Lal, who is reputed to have authored over 3,000 separate articles, pamphlets, and books on Radhasoami. He was also one of the more successful gurus in the tradition from the 1920s to the late 1930s. Yet Shiv Brat Lal admits that he met his guru, Rai Saligram, only 3 times in Agra. However, how is it that Shiv Brat Lal, who by his own admission spent very little time with his guru, became regarded as a major player in Radhasoami circles? By almost all accounts, he was not appointed by his guru to act as a master, nor did he receive any of his guru's property, often a key element in solidifying the status of a would-be successor. In other words, how did Shiv Brat Lal rise to prominence? The answer appears to be his widely circulated publications. Indians read his books, and authors of books carry their own unique credentials. Naturally, Radhasoami gurus are no different. Shiv Brat Lal is also not an isolated example. Paul Twitchell, one-time disciple of Kirpal Singh of Ruhani Satsang, an offshoot of Radhasoami Satsang Beas, started his own religion, Ekankar, by writing about it in various psychic and spiritual magazines such as Psychic Observer and Orion. By publishing his self-proclamations in widely read articles and books, Twitchell, in a way, created a form of legitimacy, a form of verifying his authenticity. Today, each Radhasoami branch boasts of its own publications, and seldom do any of the branches sell the literature of other groups. Each branch, from Dayalbagh to Sawan Kirpal Mission, publishes nicely bound volumes containing the teachings of their respective gurus. The Beas Satsang sells over 100 titles in several different languages and has launched a well-organized campaign to place several of their English titles in libraries around the world. Ironically, the overwhelming majority of Radhasoami literature is in English, which is another partial explanation for why Radhasoami has so easily and quickly spread beyond its Agra origins. Not unlike international business transactions, which are usually conducted in English, a large number of Radhasoami organizations have chosen to use English as the primary medium to spread their teachings. About the authors. Andrea Diem Lane is Professor of Philosophy at Mount San Antonio College, as well as chairperson of the department. She received her Ph.D. and M.A. in Religious Studies from the University of California, Santa Barbara, where she did her doctoral studies under Professor Ninian Smart. Professor Diem received a B.A. in Psychology with an emphasis on brain research from the University of California, San Diego, where she did pioneering visual cortex research under the tutelage of Dr. V.S. Ramachandran. Dr. Diem is the author of several books, including an interactive textbook on religion entitled How Scholars Study the Sacred, and an interactive book on the famous Einstein board debate over the implications of quantum theory entitled Quantum Weirdness. Andrea and David are the parents of 2 boys, Sean Michael and Kelly Joseph. David Christopher Lane is a professor of philosophy at Mount San Antonio College and formerly an adjunct lecturer in science and religion at California State University, Long Beach. He received his Ph.D. in the Sociology of Knowledge from the University of California, San Diego, where he was also a recipient of a Regents Fellowship. He has taught previously at Warren College at UCSD, the University of London, and the California School of Professional Psychology. He has given invited lectures at various universities, including the London School of Economics. He is the author of a number of published books, such as The Making of a Spiritual Movement, The Untold Story of Paul Twitchell and Ekang Ka, The Radhasoami Tradition, A Critical History of Guru Succession, Exposing Cults, When the Skeptical Mind Confronts the Mystical, and The Unknowing Sage, The Life and Work of Baba Fakir Chand, among others. David and Andrea have most recently finished producing annotated bibliographies, along with pertinent introductions, on Radhasoami and Ekang Ka for Oxford University Press.